Welcome to another edition of Play It Through, and on this edition it's Popeye, brought to us by Nintendo. Based on the arcade game of the same name, Popeye happens to be not only one of my favorite arcade games of all time, it also happens to have a pretty interesting history when it comes to Nintendo. The game features 3 different screens of Popeye trying to save olive oil by collecting either hearts, music notes, or the letters that spell out the words "Help Me," and all while having to deal with the evil Bluto, the Sea Hag, and Bernard the Vulture. So here we go with Popeye for the NES. The game features 2 different modes, either an A or B mode, with B mode starting off on these slightly more difficult stages. That's the mode I'll be playing, and is also the levels that introduced the Sea Hag to the game. You can also play the game 2-player by taking turns each time Popeye loses a life. You control Popeye pretty easily, moving left and right. Though Popeye cannot jump, he actually can punch, and this is your main line of defense. Though you can't punch Bluto, you can take out the different other enemies that appear, such as the skulls and the bottles that Bluto throws at you. In each of the levels you must grab all the items before they end up reaching the bottom and end up disappearing underneath the water itself. You'll have a brief period of time once they hit the water before they completely disappear. If you end up losing one of the items, it's an instant loss of life, just like if Popeye ends up getting hit by one of the many different enemies of the levels. There's a few different designs to each of the levels. Each of them are different, including this one that introduces you have a bucket on the top of the screen that you can actually put on Bluto's head for big points, as well as of course each of the levels features Popeye's famous spinach. Grabbing the spinach will power up Popeye for a short period of time, in which case you can actually run into Bluto and take him out and knock him off screen. All items that are on screen at the time when you pick up the spinach freeze in place, so you can easily grab them without having to worry about them going off screen and disappearing. Here at the end of the level, I climb up here, knock the bucket down onto Bluto's head for a big 2,000 point score, and then I go over and grab the spinach just to kind of add insult to injury to Bluto and knock him off screen. I then grab the last heart and move on to level 2. It's interesting to note that Popeye was actually the original inspiration for the game Donkey Kong. Shigeru Miyamoto, this is one of his actual first games he ever worked on. Donkey Kong originally started off as a Popeye game, with Donkey Kong being Bluto and Mario being Popeye. The game was then changed later on to feature original characters, but Nintendo still had the rights to Popeye, so they created the Popeye Arcade game, and like I said, this is easily one of my favorite arcade titles. There's a big difference though between the NES and arcade versions, as the arcade version is a lot tougher, which is not uncommon for arcade versions of games, being that they were trying to get you through as many quarters as they possibly could. One of the big differences though is that Bluto is much quicker in the arcade version, and he's a lot more craftier. He also has a few different moves in his arsenal than he has in the NES version. He doesn't seem to like to jump down the platforms as quickly as he does in the arcade, as well as Bluto can actually stick his hand underneath the platform and swipe at you. In the second level, as you notice, not only did we deal with Bluto and the Sea Hag, but we also had Sweet Pea up in the upper left corner on the balloon that if you ended up hitting the spring, you could bounce up and get big points if you ended up colliding with them. Level number 3, the final level of the game, has you collecting the letters that spell out the word "Help Me." And each time you grab a new letter, you end up getting another piece of the ladder built in the center of the screen. Once it reaches the top, you end up saving olive oil and complete the game. During this level, we have to watch out for Bernard the Vulture as he kind of swoops in, but you can easily take him out with a nice punch to the face. You also, of course, have Bluto once again trying to track you down. You also, of course, have the spinach at your disposal at any point you can grab if Bluto is near you. Grab that spinach so you can get that free hit on Bluto and knock him off screen and get the big points. At the top of the screen, you can also see that little bit of a conveyor belt moving back and forth left and right, and you can keep jumping on it back and forth to keep riding across. Though watch out for Bluto if he's directly below you while moving back and forth, because he can still punch upwards in order to actually hit you from below. After knocking Bluto off screen, I grab the rest of the letters that are frozen in place and have to wait a few seconds for the power-up to disappear before olive oil will start throwing out letters once again. Now I just have to grab a couple more letters to complete the ladder and save olive oil. While Popeye may be far from the greatest or most memorable arcade title of all time, Its history with Nintendo and Shigeru Miyamoto makes the game interesting, and it's actually really fun to play. It's one of my favorite arcade titles, and anytime I see one of the arcade cabinets, I always give it a play and see how high of a score I can end up getting. After completing the 3 levels, you go back to level 1, and keep going through as many levels as possible, getting as high a score as you possibly can. However, that's going to wrap up this edition of Play It Through. I'd like to thank you for watching, and of course, I hope you enjoyed.